Okay. Let's do this. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio. Today we are going to recreate another painting by another of my favorite artists. Today we are going to be looking at Beauford Delaney. And Beauford Delaney, I think, is one of the great artists of the previous century, of the 20th century. And as we'll talk about here shortly, he's an artist that was well known while he was alive and kind of disappeared towards the end of his life, at least critically and popularly. And really over just the past decade or so is kind of being brought back into the official history of 20th century art. Unfortunately, he didn't have much of an opportunity to experience that recognition. But I think part of what we're doing today is to really rehabilitate this incredible master and to acknowledge his incredible contributions to art. And I think he's a super inspiring figure, a bit of a tragic figure, but to have made what he did, considering all the things that he went through and saw, I think is just for me, as I was putting together this episode, just like, man, what an inspiring fellow. So this is the painting we're going to attempt to do today. This is his portrait of the author James Baldwin, who was, as Baldwin himself says, sort of his pupil, or that Beauford Delaney was his mentor, and he wouldn't have been able to do anything had it not been for this great painter. So let's explore the life and art and attempt to recreate this great painting by this great master, Beauford Delaney. Okay, so let's actually go to... This is the steps that we're going to take today in today's episode. We're going to get the painting started with a image transfer, then we're going to stain it with a little bit of color, and then we're going to talk about mostly the biography of Beauford Delaney. We'll talk a little bit about James Baldwin, the subject of today's painting. We'll do a little bit of underpainting around the eye, the nose, lips, etc., so that we don't lose them under other layers of paint. Then we're going to go in the background, foreground, background, foreground, background, background, foreground, back and forth. And we should be done probably about 3 hours from now. This is not going to be one of our longest paintings, but it's not going to be one of the shortest paintings, excuse me, either. And of course, once the video is recorded, you can jump to these timestamps. And before we do that, just a little housekeeping. Just encouraging you to like the video. Do it right now. I'm sure you love it right now, right? So love it and like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you know when upcoming videos are happening. Like tomorrow, my plan was to do an episode at noon, and that's not going to happen now because now I got a meeting at 1:30, so I might start at like 9 a.m. tomorrow. So you want to know when that's going to happen, so hit that notification bell. Other little things you can do to help the channel is literally when there's ads, just let the ads play. You don't have to do anything, and I get some revenue. You don't have to pay anything, just 30 seconds of your time, because I always get messages from people, I don't have any money to support you. Well, just watch an ad. And you can also customize your ads. You don't have to watch the same weird ads on YouTube. You can actually get information about what you want. You can use PayPal if you do want to support the channel with as little as 25 cents or $1. You can use the YouTube Super Chat function, which really they take 40% of whatever you give. So maybe not the best option, but probably the best is you're sending an e-transfer using my email, and you can find my email on my website. Or you can contact me through the Facebook group, which I just want to mention here. There's the subject of today's painting, James Baldwin. Here's our Facebook group, and what an incredible group of people just like yourself. So I'm going to encourage you to, whatever you paint today, to take a photograph of it and upload it to the Facebook group so we can celebrate in your achievement. And while you're there, you can watch this really awesome video that I just was watching just 2 minutes before we started here about the artist Sue Kreitzman, who I think we're going to have to do a painting about her because she sounds like one of the most interesting persons I've seen in a long time. So check that out. Okay, I'm just going to reload that so that nothing starts playing in the background. Okay, let's get this party started. Oh. oh, there, I'm still here. Oh, there we go again. Oh, am I gonna... That's the last time, right? Right? Or one more time. Oh, maybe that'll be the last time. It'll do it later on, just trust me. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the image onto the canvas. So you can download this free template from the Dropbox. Let me show you. So there's the original image itself, and then there's a tracing I did of this painting, and those are in the Dropbox. There's also, this is the painting we're going to be making tomorrow morning, perhaps. But to do, anyway, long story short, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to print that out, and to find that, you go to the Dropbox folder. So the link is in the description below, and the first kind of the simple resources for our most introductory paintings are at the top of that Dropbox folder. These are our beginner paintings. I think most beginners should be able to tackle. Some are a little more complicated than others. Probably this Warner Solomon portrait of Jesus is a little bit pushing it, but it is where it is, and it's probably too late to start moving things around. And then there's another 150, 200 folders below there. Like here's the Mona Lisa right there if you're up for it. Beauford Delaney. Here we go. We got 6 files in here. There's the 2 original paintings, and then there's 2 versions of the outlines for each of those paintings, of JPEG and a PDF, whatever's easier for you to print off. So once you print it off, you get this. And there's the outline for tomorrow's painting. Let's just move you out of the way. So this is just on a regular piece of photocopy paper, and I'm going to transfer it onto this 9x12 sized canvas board. I like this brand. Sometimes it's really, and I got these from Amazon, sometimes they work out to like $1.75 a piece because you order them in bulk. Sometimes they work out to like $12 a piece. Wait, look at the price. Don't buy the really, you want to get a good deal on it, so don't overpay for any art supplies. Amazon sometimes is really great for that, and if you use the link in the description, then I get like 1/100%. So obviously it's in my interest for you to overspend on Amazon, but I wouldn't recommend it. It wouldn't make me feel too good if you did. So save your money, do a little bit of research. Their canvases are better than the ones you get at the dollar store when you order some of these. Some of them aren't that great, which is why you should. There's links to the ones that I prefer in the video description there. Okay, so I just glazed over this. I'm going to use some carbon transfer paper. I bought this from a local dollar store. Well, I'm actually going to use carbon or graphite transfer paper, not carbon transfer paper. They are different materials, but they do virtually identical things. And I just put the shiny side facing down here, right? And you can see I've used this sheet many times, of which you can do if this is what you're using it for, right? You can use it many, many times. Okay, let's just quickly go around here and get the big lines in. So big lines would be, let's say, like the hairline, the top of the head. You'll notice I did actually move this painting down a little bit because in the original painting, he's got the face, or the top of the head is actually touching the edge of the canvas, which, I think is great. But if we do that here, then we're also going to have a big gap here at the bottom, and I'd rather have well, not a gap, but we just have to extend his jacket and stuff a little bit further down there. I'd rather just see the top of his head, even though today's great artist didn't paint it like that. I mean, as I say that, I'm thinking like, oh, could there have been a meaning behind that gesture of not, having the top of the head touch the canvas? Was he trying to say something about James Baldwin being such a towering figure that he couldn't fit inside the bounds of the canvas? It's possible. That would be very clever if he thought of that like that. I think it's probably more along the lines of he just, that's how he sketched it in, and he just decided to go forward with it. But if anybody knows differently, let me know. I'd be very interested to hear an alternative explanation. And the signature... Yeah, I'll put this in here. I don't always replicate the signature of these artists. But sometimes it feels like the artist has really made the signature a part of the painting. So I think this painting is one of those paintings that fits on that. Okay. And so again, I always just do this little double check just to make sure that the lines are all there, because sometimes I peel it off in haste and realize, I forgot to do the eyes. What was I thinking? So, learn from my mistakes. That's probably what the majority of you do day after day here. Like, oh, okay, don't do that. Okay, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. So, wow, lots of comment. The chat just blew up. Okay. Wow. Okay, so let's move to the next step here. Where am I? Okay. So our next step is to stain this painting with just a little bit of color. And the way that we refer to that is we use the term, the Imprimatura. Imprimatura is an Italian word that's, artists have been using this technique for 600 plus years. And the idea is the Imprimatura means like the first layer of paint, or priming the canvas, the priming layer. And lots of different ways to go about this. Some artists don't do it at all. Some artists paint a kind of a warm brown, a rusty red color, usually earthy tone. You're going to see I'm going to use a warm yellow here in a moment. And this is the actual brand and tube of paint I'm about to squeeze, this Azo Yellow Deep. What's going on here? Azo Yellow Deep is the name that this brand, which I'm about to use, calls this particular hue. But if you don't, and I'm not paid by Amsterdam Paint here, Royal Talons, the family brand that owns this, I just think this type of paint here is probably your best bang for the buck. I'm not sponsored. No one's giving me any free supplies. That would be nice, but and I have talked to them about that, but all of this is just what I encourage you to do because it works. So if you don't have Amsterdam paint, then use Golden. This is like 3 times the price for half the amount of paint, so it's much more higher quality, but most beginners aren't going to notice the difference at all. So not maybe, unless you've just got money to spend, in which case buy the cheaper paint and then give the rest to me. Rather than waste it on this Golden. Liquitex, that works great as well. Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft for Michael's Art Supply chain, Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Dialer Rowney, Fevacryl, Nova color, chroma color, but not museum color, or probably some of those cheap paints you can find at the dollar store. You know, those little tubes for like $1. I bet you they have the same problem that this museum color does, which is that they add a little bit of white into the color as a filler. And what it does is it makes it impossible for us to mix our own black paint. And I find that super frustrating. So I would encourage you to to use one of the things I suggested here. And if you do use anything I suggest and it doesn't work and there's a problem, let me know. I don't want to be recommending paint to people that isn't working. So if you're having problems, please let me know ASAP so that we can fix that. And I can also cross them out and give them a stern talking to. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just squeezing some of that Azo Yellow Deep from this brand out onto the palette. And while I'm here, let's just put some of the other paints onto the palette. So there's probably going to be a lot of... I'm not even sure. I mean, let's just wait on that cool red because I often don't need it. So we'll just hold off for a moment, but as you can see, there's no black on here because I like to mix my own black paint. Okay, so let's continue with our stain here. I just got some water, and this is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylic paint. And so I've got maybe 40% water to 60% paint. Really, you know, adding water to acrylic paint destroys the paint. It breaks down the bonds that hold the pigments together and keep it from, you know, falling off the canvas. So why am I doing this right at the beginning? Isn't this just the stupidest thing to do according to my own instructions? Well, I do encourage a lot of stupid things, but in this case, not so stupid. Because the canvas here comes pre-gessoed, and gesso is basically paint with plaster powder in it, like plaster of Paris, the same sort of things they used to put on casts and stuff if you broke a bone. And what that does is it helps to fill in the gaps and weaves the weave on the canvas to stabilize it from expanding and contracting during humidity and temperature changes. You can also see I like to get my edges, my sides in there. That's something I've always been interested in. You don't have to do that either. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, I just love it when it gets nice and smooth. Brush out all of the... Oh, that looks great. Oh, just beautiful. Nice even surface. Now you could use purple or pink or green for this. Those would be very unconventional ways of applying the Imprimatura, but it wouldn't be wrong. I don't think you could do anything wrong when it comes to making an artwork. And don't let anybody tell you differently. If you're doing it and you like it, then that's good. Right? There's one of the reasons why I love art is that there's no real hard and fast rules. There are different styles and techniques, but there's no right or wrong way to do it. And it's one of the very few things that we can talk about like that in all of human experience. And I think that's what makes art art. So don't take my word for anything here. It's entirely possible I'm wrong about everything. which is one of the things. But having said that, we've done 260. This is 266th painting that we've created. Well, we've done about 330, but this is the 266th episode. So you can go back and you can watch some of those previous episodes, and if you think what I'm doing works, then go ahead, follow me. If you don't like the results, don't follow it. Follow somebody else. Okay, so let's wow, everything's gotten a little bit mixed up here. I think let's go to this next step. Okay, so while the painting here, the Imprimatura, is drying, and it dries relatively quickly, another good reason to add a little bit of water in there, let's talk a little bit about today's artist and briefly the subject of today's painting. So, what's going on here? Okay. So, Beauford Delaney, today's artist, was born in 1901, dies in 1979 at the age of 77. And Beauford Delaney, I think, is really one of the great 20th century painters. A really interesting fellow whose styles changed quite a lot over the course of his life. He sort of began, maybe why don't we just take a quick look at some of his art here as we kind of get started. So he was trained in a relatively traditional academic way. We'll talk about his teachers here shortly, but you could see that his style kind of begins relatively straightforward. We can see there's definitely some post-impressionist inspiration here, and maybe even some influence of the Cubists, just in this kind of blocky way. I can even see a little bit of Emily Carr in there, although I'm sure he would never even have heard of Emily Carr. But this style is not atypical, necessarily, of some of the work that was being done in the early 1930s, when he's kind of really starting to come into his own. And you can see, like, he's painting, some of this self-portrait he did here, this looks right out of something that Henri Matisse could have done himself, right? We'll talk about, there's a bunch, he did a number of paintings of James Baldwin. This is, I think, probably the earliest one, if I recall. And we'll see here that his style starts to change at the end of the 1940s, early 1950s, and starts to become more and more abstract. You could see these, well, even just like right here, 1947, they start becoming kind of weirder and weirder. And I mean that in a good way, in the best way possible. Just becoming way more stylized, which incidentally made him, he was kind of fitting in with the times, but it seems kind of like, as I was sort of doing research, thinking like, he was almost like the contrarian to whatever was going on. He was doing something just a little bit different. And then when something else kind of started, he kind of switched and went to the stuff that people had been doing before, or what people hadn't done yet. He was always a little bit on his own journey, never really kind of fitting in, as we'll see, just not just with his visual art, but just with his life in general. And you see here by the mid-1950s, he's fully abstract. There's another James Baldwin painting here. I love some of these paintings. This Charlie Parker Yardbird, I think, is gorgeous. I have another version of it here. It's a little bit larger. And then so he's doing those kinds of paintings. This is while he's living in Paris. And then he kind of, towards the mid-1960s, kind of goes back. And you can see more and more of these figurative works start coming back into play. Here's today's painting, which is kind of like a little bit of a bridge between his more abstract work and the more representational work that he did. Like, man, these are great. And so he's just somebody who is a little bit all over the place. He's clearly got lots of different interests and isn't afraid to explore different different styles, etc. Here, this is kind of an early big campfire in the park. It was one of his early kind of hits, I guess, or successful little masterpieces that he cranked out. I think this is, I mean, the way that paint is applied is just gorgeous. I think that's so cool. There's another portrait. Here's some of his abstracts. Like, this is cool. This actually reminds me a lot of the so-called piss paintings by Andy Warhol in the late 1960s, where he literally had people urinate on these copper plates that then oxidized. But it's oddly, like, very, you know, prescient, like that type of painting. This is the painting I was talking about, Charlie Parker Yardbird. I think that is so cool. Just very expressive. It kind of also reminds me a little bit of Philip Guston, another, well, a Canadian painter who really spent most of his life in the United States, who was also very defiant in terms of style and technique, and fell out of favor with the kind of intelligentsia at the time for not being consistent and abandoning abstract painting in the same way that Beauford Delaney himself did. Like, I think a lot of maybe it's because of these pinks and blues and stuff, which are kind of Guston's trademarks. I just wanted, while we're here, this is a blog that was started, the Friends of Beauford Delaney, in order to help raise money for his gravestone, which we'll talk about. So let's just kind of go quickly back to his biography. So Beauford Delaney is, he was born into a giant family. He was the 8th of 10 children, only 4 of whom survived into adulthood. And his father was a minister and a barber. His mother had been a former slave, had been born into slavery, and so kind of, you know, you could see, like, if your own mother had been working on a plantation and had been sold into slavery, I don't know about you, but that would be tough stuff to get over, no matter how old and immature you felt you were later on in life. That would be, I mean, yeah, that would make, just thinking about it makes me angry. And so obviously that kind of, that experience, she would have passed down this kind of quiet dignity that I think Beauford Delaney is really well known for. Someone who, despite all of the hurdles that he ends up facing throughout the course of his life, continues to plow forward in the face of kind of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. It's also, I think, through his mother that there's this idea of kind of making do with what is available. Did I find that? I gotta show you, since while I just mentioned this, I think there's a link in here. Yeah, okay, I want to show you this. Oops. Talk about making artwork with what's available. This is a painting that Beauford Delaney did in 1954 on a rain jacket. He took his jacket, you know, it probably would have been back in the day a canvas jacket, and stretched it over a frame and made a painting on top of it because he wanted to paint and didn't have a spare canvas available. So he used his own clothing to make an artwork, right? Which is just like, that is super inspiring. And again, I can't help but think that that's probably something that he would have, that is, you know, maybe a little bit of an unconscious nod to his mother and kind of doing whatever you can despite your circumstances. He makes a great point here in his own journal. Says, 6 of his other brothers and sisters died before they reached adulthood, and so he just talks about why did that happen. So much sickness came from improper places to live, long distances to walk to schools that were improperly heated, too much work at home, natural conditions common to the poor that take the bright flowers like terrible cold in nature. That's, I mean, just the poetry in that statement alone is beautiful, and you could see why someone like James Baldwin, who has got to be one of the most articulate authors of the last 20th century, you could see how James Baldwin would fall under the sway of this brilliant, multi-talented artist, because not only was Beauford Delaney a great painter, he was a great musician, he did a little bit of sculpture, so it's like, yeah, obviously a little bit of writing himself. It's also worth mentioning, too, that his younger brother, Joseph, was also an artist, Joseph Delaney, and they grew up together, and they were great friends, although, as we'll see here, they kind of drifted apart because Beaufort Delaney was gay, and that was something that he hid from his family and from many of his friends because of fears, very true fears, that would destroy his career and he would get ostracized from the African American community, which at the time was not very tolerant to homosexuality, being a little bit more conservative and more deeply religious than probably other races in New York and Chicago or Boston, and especially the South at the time. Let me see, what else do I want to say here? So one of the things that the two brothers did is that they worked for a sign company, painting signs, and it was sort of through that Lloyd Branson, who was really one of the most successful artists in the American South at the late 1800s, basically took Beaufort Delaney in under his wing and is kind of credited as having discovered Beaufort Delaney. And really, Beaufort Delaney was one of the only students that Lloyd Branson ever had in his life. He, which I just think is, again, you were talking in the American South, you have a white artist mentoring a black artist, a closeted gay black artist. Probably Beaufort wasn't really, he might have not been quite aware of that side of his life at the time. But major props to Lloyd Branson for really going out of his way at a time where that probably was not something that would have endeared him to his collectors and critics in the American South. So, yeah, maybe I forgot to mention that Beaufort Delaney was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. So, I mean, again, that's just, that's pretty cool. So Lloyd Branson teaches Beaufort Delaney everything that he can think of. From there, he writes glowing letters of recommendation, and Beaufort Delaney is able to later attend schools in Boston, where he studies at the South Boston School of Art and the Copley Society, Massachusetts Normal School. And that is like, that really made a massive difference in that young artist's life. Having an artist of such high esteem make those introductions for him was life-changing. And it's through, so he moves from Knoxville, Tennessee to Boston, Massachusetts, where he also starts to get involved in a little bit of the growing civil rights movement. Again, this isn't like the mid 1920s, so it's it's still in its kind of infancy, at least as we kind of think of it growing until the 1960s. Obviously, there was a civil rights movement that went back hundreds of years before, but it's really sort of just picking up steam. And so then he makes this big decision to move from Boston to New York City, which at the time was was certainly the center of the American art world, but still, compared to what was going on in Europe, kind of a small little village in terms of the art world. And of course, he moves to New York City at the very beginning of the Great Depression. So not a great time to move to New York, where everyone else is also hustling to try to make a buck and to feed themselves. But Beauford Delaney just talks about how, and he sort of recognizes that, ooh, this is maybe not the best place for me to be right now. There's not a lot of opportunities because everyone's fighting for whatever's little scraps that are available. But he did really appreciate, like, he saw the kind of the hustle of people, and he was also kind of, for really one of the first times in his life, thrown into a situation where he's surrounded by all sorts of people from cultures and backgrounds from all over the world. And I think that is also kind of, his eyes are opened to maybe an alternative way of life that he wasn't really familiar with, both in the American South and also in Boston. So the courage and camaraderie that inspired him to feel somehow, some way, there was something I could manage. If only with some stronger force of will, I could find the courage to surmount the terror and fear of this immense city and accept everything insofar as possible with some calm and determination. Right? Like, I always get he's sort of this plucky fellow who's sort of like, okay, I just find myself now in the worst situation possible. Let's make a go of this. Let's make the best we can out of this situation. And again, I find that super inspiring. One of the things that happened, so I don't know if he lived in Harlem, but in Harlem, at the kind of the turn of the 20th century, there's this, they call the Harlem Renaissance, where you have this a number. Do I have a? Let me see. I'm sure there's a link to the Harlem Renaissance here somewhere. Oh, here we are, right up top. So the Harlem Renaissance is sort of this kind of art movement that, or it's not even just art, it's painting, drawing, sculpture, poetry, music, where you have this intellectual and cultural revival of African American music, dance, fashion, theater, literature, politics, scholarship, because it's this place where many of the great African Americans in general, were sort of the great minds of the time, are all moving to Harlem. So because they feel this is probably the most free place that they can be. And so Beauford Delaney is right in the mix, hanging out with all these people, and there's lots of spirited discussions, often very, very, very political discussions about how to kind of change the world and overcome this disenfranchisement of Black Americans, as it says here. And Beauford Delaney is interested in those discussions, but he also finds, I don't think he was really the most political person. So I think he found himself more of like a fly on the wall in those rooms. He's like, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be, but I don't know if I'm really into, this type of a fight. And so he ends up spending a little bit more of his time down in Greenwich Village. And it's amazing, like, Beauford Delaney really finds himself kind of, like, the company he keeps is sort of like the who's who of great artists. Like, so George O'Keeffe, Henry Miller, the great photographer, why did it just escapes me? I'm sure it's in here somewhere. George O'Keeffe's husband. What was his name? Let's see, I gotta get this right or drive me crazy. Alfred Stieglitz, right? Alfred Stieglitz was also not only one of the most, really the father of photography as we know it today, especially as an art form, but Alfred Stieglitz was also ended up owning and running his own art gallery. So you're talking about, those are like three of the most important, figures in New York at the time, all white people as well, of course. But he's also, there's Alfred Stieglitz. He also becomes a great friend of the painter Stuart Davis, who we did an episode on Stuart Davis a while back. And I think Stuart Davis is also kind of a good sort of, it's no surprise to me whatsoever that Beaufort becomes a good friend of Stuart Davis, because both of those artists are kind of like artists off in their own world. Like, they're not really participating with the main art movements at the time, which is why I probably really like both of those artists. Another reason why Beaufort Delaney spends more time down in Greenwich Village is there's a bit more of a gay scene down there, and being a closeted homosexual man, I think he, for the first time, really feels like this is where I feel I can sort of let my guard down. I can sort of be who I want to be. And that must have been a huge relief for a fellow like this. Because then when he would go back uptown from Greenwich Village and go back to Harlem, he would encounter people, African Americans, who were not at all open-minded to that type of a lifestyle at all. So, that would can imagine sort of going to this place, which is sort of promoted as the place where the great African American intellectuals and artists can gather and be amongst, their fellow African Americans, and yet he goes there and feels like, if anybody knows what I get up to when I'm not here, like, not only could I be ostracized, but somebody here would probably beat me up, and maybe even worse, right? Maybe, it wasn't unheard of for people to get killed for being gay, right? So you can just imagine, I can just imagine how conflicted he would be. And of course, he's also does not tell his family, doesn't tell his younger brother, Joseph, about any of this. So not oddly enough, or I guess not oddly enough at all, one can then understand why in 1953, at age 52, as he's really kind of, he decides to move to Paris, which was sort of famously way more open-minded in most respects, especially to African American people. And so he leaves New York just as New York is becoming the epicenter of the art world. And, that sort of transition was happening. It really, World War II was the fulcrum that caused this main swing from Europe to the United States primarily, and really to New York entirely. So some of the things that one of the reasons why they say that probably that really affected Beaufort Delaney's career and why he's not more widely known today is this move from New York, where had he probably stayed there, he would probably become one of the most well-known artists of his time, certainly the most famous African-American artist of his time. But he chooses to go to Paris instead, where he can live his life with more freedom and really be who he wants. And so he makes this decision to pursue his, the freedom in his life over success in his career, which is, man, that's what a tragic Sophie's Choice kind of thing to have to make, right? Now I'm trying to remember. He would have. Where does he meet? I'm trying to remember where he met James Baldwin for the first time. I think it's in Paris. Oh no, so okay, so that's in Greenwich Village as well. So that's, you know, where he's hanging out with Henry Miller, Alfred Stieglitz, and George O'Keeffe. He is essentially responsible for partly discovering James Baldwin, and it's worth just sort of taking a quick look at James Baldwin while we're right here. The reason I chose this photo here is because this is, you know, it kind of resembles today's painting in some extent. Like I mean, one of the features, especially with the younger James Baldwin, is those eyes, the big eyes, right? But James Baldwin was one of the great American authors of the last century, was also African American and also homosexual or bisexual, depending on what period of time we're talking about. And a number of James Baldwin's books have been made into movies, more so recently. James Baldwin is also a super articulate fellow. Like, if you go on YouTube and watch some debates, James Baldwin appeared on all sorts of TV shows throughout the 1950s and 60s, where they would often have these like hour-long debates. Not like CNN or Fox News today, where they have 10 different people and they're all shouting at one another. You would literally just have two people sitting on a stage debating one topic for an hour. Like, can you imagine like a civil discussion with people who don't share political views for an hour? Like, I would find that, I would get it TV if something like that was occurring today. But anyway, if you want to just see like a really well-spoken, super smart person, watch some videos of James Baldwin talking and debating with some of the kind of main figures at the time. You know, like Norman Mailer, for instance. You'll fall in love with that guy for sure. But anyway, so James Baldwin also goes to Paris, not together or anything. As far as I know, there was no relationship whatsoever. But they, I think a lot of African Americans did move to. It wasn't unusual for an African American to move to France and Paris before, during, and stay there after the war, because many of them served in World War II as well. So Beauford, Delaney. I think you have more musicians found a great deal of success in Paris than painters. Like, you have Miles Davis and John Coltrane and all these like great singers and saxophone players, trumpet players. The jazz artists really did well in Paris. As for painters, a little bit less so. Because again, most of the art world had turned its attention to New York. So, you know, during the next few decades of his life, he's really struggling. I think, obviously, throughout most of his life, he's dealt with the lingering intergenerational effects of slavery, what his mother went through, and kind of how that would have, the trauma that goes from generation to generation to generation, and it really continues to this day. And obviously his sexual identity, you know, struggling with that. So, and then on top of all those things, his own career kind of not really ever taking off in a satisfying way. And he really becomes an alcoholic, and just, you know, there's periods of time where he's just doing nothing but drinking and getting more and more sick. His friends are obviously super concerned with his deterioration, and eventually he's committed to St. Anne's Hospital for the Insane in Paris, and eventually passes away there a few years later. Now, the Hospital for the Insane, I don't know if they have any hospitals with such a terrible name anymore, but there's the history for you. So here's James Baldwin writes in the introduction to a catalog of Beaufort Delaney's paintings. The darkness of Beaufort's beginnings in Tennessee many years ago was a black-blue midnight indeed, opaque and full of sorrow. And I do not know, nor will any of us really ever know, what kind of strength it was that enabled him to make so dogged and splendid a journey. Right? I mean, there's a great quote by a great author, and there's a number of great quotes here in this article. You know, not always the case in Wikipedia, but there's a few in here. You know, here's another where we're talking about, like, literally an essay written in Art in America, which is a major art magazine to this day, like literally titled, "What Happened to Beaufort Delaney?" Like, why wasn't he more well known? And they're talking about just how, you know, over the past few decades, how that's starting to change as sort of art history, things start settling in art history, and we have a clearer idea. But just before we move on here, I just want to kind of close with a couple of great, and a few more great quotes by James Baldwin. So here, in 1985, James Baldwin described the impact of Delaney on his own life, saying, quote, "He was the first living proof for me that a black man could be an artist. In a warmer time, a less blasphemous place, he would have been recognized as my master and I his pupil. He became, for me, an example of courage and integrity, humility and passion, and absolute integrity. I saw him shaken many times, and I lived to see him broken, but I never saw him bow." He says he marveled at his ability to emulate the light in his work, despite the darkness that surrounded the majority of his life. And he believes that that's, you know, the true victory that Delaney had secured throughout the course of his life. Baldwin also says here, Baldwin admired his keen ability to, quote, lead the inner and the outer eye directly and inexorably to a new confrontation with reality. Perhaps I should not say flatly what I believe, that he is a great painter, among the very greatest, but I do know that great art can only be created out of love, and that no greater lover has ever held a brush. Oh, that, I gotta read that again. That is, like, what a pure poetry. Again here, James Baldwin about Beaufort Delaney. I do not know, I do know that great art can only be created out of love, and that no greater lover has ever held a brush. Says it right there, right? No greater lover. Beaufort Delaney, quite sadly in his will, asked to be buried in Potter's Field, and so was literally buried in an unmarked grave for many years in Paris, until that grave was planning on exhuming the remains and throwing it into basically a mass grave. So even that plot, unmarked plot, was not enough. They were just going to toss it into a big heap. And in the late 2000s, to the credit of a number of great individuals, came together, founded Les Amis de Beaufort Delaney, of which I showed back here, to raise money for a gravestone and to pay for the burial plot. So there's lots of resources on the blog here to continue looking at, but I think, you know, this painter is, I think, just such an exceptional human being. And I mean, at the end of the day, the art itself stands on its own. I think today's painting we're about to do is absolutely incredible. And look at, there's so many comments in here. Wow, this might be some of the most comments I've ever seen in one of these live streams. So Pascal and Lolly, you guys have been very active in here. I'm not going to have a chance to read through it maybe while we're painting here, but I love the all of these comments here. Okay, so let's start painting here. Otherwise, I'll be spending the next hour reading. So what we want to do now is we want to do a little bit of underpainting. I think that might be helpful just for the majority of people painting with me. so that we don't get lost in the many details that are yet to come here. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix our own black. We could do like a dark brown. In fact, maybe let's just take a quick little look. It's always a good idea just to double check. Yeah, I think we want to make a black. There is probably a black that he painted under here. Maybe a brown. No, even I see black. So let's mix a black. So to mix a black, unless you want to just use black, we want to use some of our cool blue, some of our cool yellow, about half or 33% of each of these here, and then mix these together into a big blob. And those three colors are going to cancel each other out. I just think that this is one of the most amazing things that you can do with paint, is mixing your own black, because it doesn't, until somebody showed me how to do this, I didn't think that that was possible. I thought it was a bit of a magic trick, which is why so many artists, you know, during the Renaissance and beyond, were really into alchemy, because if you realize that you can take those three relatively bright colors and just by mixing them together get a black, well, then you start thinking, well, I mean, it's not so far off to being able to make your own gold or diamonds or anything else, right? I mean, now we might think that that's a little bit, you know, a little wild, but I can also understand why people 500 years ago thought, hey, you never know, you can do pretty magical things with paint. Maybe we just need to mix the right substance in there and we'll have infinite amount of gold appearing in our palette. So I'm just going to take this brush and just very quickly go around some of these outlines. Now, this is not the way that everyone thinks about an underpainting. Some people would consider an underpainting to be literally the first pass over the background and foreground, middle ground, where everything is kind of mostly covered, and then they're going to switch to maybe oil paint. And some people would say that, you know, an underpainting could be done in combination with the Imprimatura, just maybe using a little bit more of a saturated version of the Imprimatura, but this is the way that I'm going to do it. And you do you. Whichever way you want to do it, do it. So really the main reason I'm doing this is just to help preserve these details so that as the painting develops, I don't lose the these details. Okay. Actually, maybe I'm just going to do... Okay, I think that's probably good enough. might have mixed a little bit too much black. Well, I guess we'll need it for his hair, but I don't know why I put so much in here. So let's move to next step. So now that we've got our initial sketch, our underdrawing and underpainting established, let's go into the background and start painting in there. Now we do have, you know, this yellow that we started with here, but there's slightly different yellows. And actually, as I look at this, I see more color now. Actually, colors that I didn't even see before. And sometimes that's what happens when we're looking at paintings. We start, like, I didn't notice this blue under there previously, that teal, and there's obviously some white. Oh, you know what, now that I look at it, it is possible. I think you could get away with painting a teal or a cold blue underneath all of this. Do I want to do that? Probably, well, do I want to do that? I don't want to do that entirely, but I think I'm going to do a little bit of it because it looks like a lot of fun. So I'm going to take some of my cool blue. I'm going to take this cool yellow. A little bit of white. It's still too green. I need more cool blue. Well, I might use a little bit of both of these here. So let's look at these side by side and just see if I'm about to do something really stupid. Probably. I'm going to take this and paint in I don't think I'm going to paint the whole thing in. Paint like that. Now I'm looking at the face. I don't see any of that color in the... well, maybe. A little bit of it. It's possible that that's there. But I don't think so. I think he's really using warm and cool colors the way we've been talking about it. We can see really some warm blue in the hair. And then this looks like we've got a brown underneath. Well, maybe. Maybe a bit in the shirt. Okay. So what should we do here? Let's... So then, yeah, I think that's good for a moment. We're going to blow dry this, and then we're going to paint a totally different color over top of it. So I'm just going to get the hair dryer out. Okay, so we could have, and I suspect probably Beauford Delaney might have started with a white canvas and then painted this directly onto the white canvas to start. So, but that's okay. I mean, we got our yellow. We're about to cover most of that yellow again anyway. You know, this is why I love doing these episodes, because, you know, I've looked at this painting for hours before today's episode, and I don't know how I did not notice that blue, that teal, kind of green color in the background until now. It's one of those things, until you really start thinking about, okay, how would I paint that you start kind of looking more closely at details like the color, and you're like, oh, okay. Another reason why I also blow dried this relatively thoroughly is I want to paint over top of it with the yellow, and if there's still a lot of this blue and green in the mixture, it's going to mix into the yellow, which is not a bad thing, but maybe for this particular purpose it might not be ideal, right? I think what we want in the way that he's painted this is to have mostly just yellow, kind of semi-transparent yellow going over top of this. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my, this is matte medium. Matte medium is just paint without pigment. And you can get gloss medium or semi-gloss medium. I prefer matte medium. Matte is just not shiny, and that's my main preference, is I tend to not like shiny paint. So right there, that's about 50-50. I'm not sure how much I'm going to put yellow. We'll see. Let's get some white. Actually, let's get most of that off here. What I'm going to do, let's mix this up. So even though I got some white, this is just my matte medium and my cool yellow paint. Okay, let's try painting this over top of this background. So if I didn't add matte medium, this would cover that green and blue much better. You know, yellow is not a particularly opaque color to start with. But I don't want to obliterate all that color anyway, so it's partly why I added this medium in there. Let's go here and cover up the shirt a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to take this white and I'm going to take it and I'm going to put little blobs of it around here. I'm going to go back into my paint. The reason why is I don't want to mix it all. I want it to be kind of mixing on the painting here. Maybe I put too much white in there. That's okay. You can always let it dry and come back to it. So I'm doing my best not to try to blend it. I'm probably actually even did too much there. I probably should have been a little bit more light-handed about this, but... You know what? I'm going to take a rag. I think I went a little far here. So I'm just going to take this rag, try to bring a bit of that blue, the teal back up. Not everywhere. See, I might have gone a little too far here, so let's just cover a bit of that back up again. Okay. And then I'm going to feel like, you know what, I still want to bring... It probably looks like I'm losing my mind, going back and forth. What are you doing? But that's, you know, part of that process of like hiding and covering and hiding and covering. And what we're just doing, that type of wiping away with a rag is right out of oil painting. It's something oil painters do all the time, even going back hundreds of years. It's might look a little bit more unusual to us today in an acrylic painting class, because in acrylic painting it's something you rarely do, because acrylic paint dries so much more quickly. Anyway, let's leave that, I think, our background there for now. And let's start working on the foreground. So okay, so let's now turn our attention from the background, which is not finished, but we want to just kind of get that started. And then once that's started, then we can kind of go back and see the background for what it is, maybe a little bit more clearly. So, which color should we start with? Well, let's look at this face a little bit more in depth. Let's see if we can figure out what Beauford Delaney is doing here. There's a lot of nuance in that color, isn't there? In that face. Like, you got a little bit of that green from the background. I mean, yeah, I think we probably could have used that same green. Everything we just did in the background, I bet you we could have done that on the foreground. What is the next color here? I don't know. You know, I am almost tempted to paint it in a similar way that we painted the Horace Pippin painting we did last week, in which I used a lot of slow dry medium to blend. This might be Yeah. So I can't, it's hard for me to tell which color is here first, because there's a lot of them. We have this warm yellow, we've got a number of different kinds of brown, lots of different browns. You have a bit of a pinkish red. We've got a little bits of blues and purples in here. So I think we're just going to start painting with one of them. I think what I'll do is mix a brown, and then we're going to kind of modify that brown a number of times. So let's I'm going to go for this little bit of a lighter brown. So I'm going to take my my warm yellow. Let's take that warm yellow. Take just a little bit of red. And a little bit of blue. Right, you can see I barely any, right? Mix this in there. Whoops, too much blue. It's kind of greenish. Take a bit more red. Very little red. Okay, I think that's probably good. And now what I'm going to do is, yeah, here it is. So now I'm going to take slow dry medium, or as some brands might call it, paint retarder, which I think is pretty offensive. But I'm going to put this in here. How much should I put in? A little bit more. The one, just like when we add any medium in there, it's going to dilute the paint. So that can be kind of frustrating when you're working with paint that's diluted. And you know, maybe while I'm right here, I'm going to mix a few different browns, actually. So that I've got a number of options. So let's take this one here. This one's going to be a bit more of a darker brown. Let's do another one that's, let's say, just maybe mostly red. But it has a bit of white in it. So let's show you what I've got here. So these three colors were all created with these three paints, all of which are warm. Our warm yellow, our warm red, and our warm blue. But you can see the different ratios involved. Now this one, you might say, well, you didn't put any warm yellow in it. It's just really these warm blue and warm red. Yeah, but there was some warm yellow on my brush, and I just knew that I didn't want to put too much yellow in it, so that's what I've got. But let's take some slow dry medium and put those in both of these. That's what's going to allow us to kind of have some fun blending and mixing colors. Okay. I'm just thinking this might be too big of a brush. This is kind of fun. I love doing this kind of thing where we're going to really start playing with the paint and kind of mixing. It's been a while since we've done a painting like this too, so where should we begin? Let's back out a bit. Or maybe let's go right into here. Let's zoom in. Okay, so now we can take this paint. Where should we start? Let's maybe go to this fleshy, warm pink brown. And let's, I mean, he's painting this almost everywhere, but and let's try to apply bigger blobs of it. In fact, I think I want to put just a little bit more white. And again, you can see that when I'm mixing it, I don't just mix it into this blob, because if I do it, you know, too light, then I've got a big thing of paint that I can't use. So now the one thing, I mean, so now we're painting a lot more like oil painters. People have been asking me to teach an oil painting class for a while, so here's some oil. This is what it's like to paint with oils. Because now when we start painting over top of this, this is not going to be dry. It's going to start mixing into those other layers. Let's just look in the hair. Not really much of this color in the hair. Well, actually, maybe there's a little bit more of this darker color up here. Now let's go to the lighter color next. Let's take our lighter brown. Okay. So where this can become problematic is where those colors butt up against one another, they're going to want to mix. I should have used that previous color for those lips. Okay, let's just go back to... Now let's go into our darker brown. Just mix that slow dry medium into here. Okay. So remember, this can be frustrating because, you know, the color that starts on your brush is not necessarily the color that ends up, and you may have to wipe some paint away occasionally. Okay. So this brown, now that I see this, that probably could have been much lighter. Probably even closer to just my warm yellow right out of the tube. That's okay. We'll paint some of that back in here. In fact, maybe let's do a little bit of that right now. Or actually, before I even do that, I think what I'm going to do is paint a little bit of white. And I'm going to take a little bit of blue. Oh, it looks like that's a little bit cooler blue, isn't it? So I'm going to take a cool blue. I'm just going to take this warm yellow right out of the tube and try to paint a little bit with that. There's already so much slow dry medium in this painting that I don't think there's any need to add more to it. Okay. I know you're like, oh, it looks a little weird. That's okay. I do think that maybe I want to go down to the jacket now and his shirt and think about like what color that is. Now there's something odd here. What is that color? And how did he get that? What is going on under that color? I'm finding it hard to read that color. to me, like there's like a little bit of, it's like a tan, a cool tan color. I think it might even be something like this. Oops, I think might be something like that. Our warm yellow that we initially started painting with the face, with a little bit of black and a little bit of white. Ooh, it's a little bit darker than I was hoping. Okay, I'm going to use that color, but I'm going to put matte medium in here to dilute it. Okay, now again, that's not the final color, but I want to get this kind of whatever's underneath that yellow. I think it needs to be there. Okay, now let's paint this jacket. I think we can go back into our cool yellow that we painted earlier. Now my pencil lines have mostly disappeared. So if that's the case, we can always draw it back. I think so very subtle. I think there's going to be a few more layers of that same color. It's going to go right back over top of that. So we'll just leave it like that. So we might not feel super happy with the painting right now, but I guarantee you this is probably very close to the way it looked for Beauford Delaney when he's working on this painting back in 1965. Because he's layering these colors like that. And I suspect there's a few reasons why he's doing it. One is it's kind of fun to do, right? You're kind of just, you don't really know what you're going to get because he's painting with oil paint. And there's a lot of kind of chance as that happens, as those colors get on there. And you have to be really skilled to make it work, otherwise it turns into mud. So there's a little bit of almost bravado going on here of painting in this particular way that Beauford Delaney's doing, not me. Not a lot of bravado here, so there's that. I think that, I don't know if this would be necessarily true, but the way that I would sort of read into it is that he's almost like trying to show us the complexity of James Baldwin as being, you know, a very intelligent person with lots of layers, a very deep thinker. I'm thinking like maybe I'll put that in this painting, create that literal depth of color that kind of reflects the depth of this person's character and personality. And then, of course, you know, both of them were homosexual, or maybe in this case bisexual, in a time where it wasn't particularly accepted, only maybe in certain small circles. And so maybe there's this idea of some things being hidden, some things being covered, some things being mostly covered, right? Again, I could just be totally projecting things that aren't there, or maybe we're deep in the subconscious. I don't know. But it's fun to do. That's one of the, I think, great fun things to do when we're looking at art is you or listen to music, or you read a book, and then you read a little bit about the author's biography, and you think like, oh, I wonder, is this a kind of thinly veiled metaphor to what they themselves are experiencing in their life? Or is this just a total coincidence? You know, or as Sigmund Freud says, sometimes a pipe is just a pipe. Right? Oh, look at all these folks here in the chat. There's Sandra, there's Lolly, there's, oops, what am I doing here? Kathy, Brig, Pascal. Wow, you guys are busy. Look at this chat. This thread's huge. I'm sure you have to keep on scrolling to get past to see who else is here. Nikki's there. Hi, Nikki. Pascaline is there. Paula's there. Hey, Paula, how are you doing? Wow, oh my goodness, this just keeps going on forever, doesn't it? I'm gonna have to stop because I think I just keep scrolling and scrolling. Okay, so let's go to another slide here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to talk about the background again, and I want to just add a little bit more color back in the background. We'll see how close we're getting here. So, let's put them side by side. So I'm just going to use this same color that I used for the it's cool yellow so it's 50% cool yellow, 50% matte medium. There was a little bit of white that got in there, but I really wanted to try to keep it those two things separate. And now again, I have to be careful not to just paint all of the blue out. I want to keep some areas where it's kind of poking through very subtly. So it might be easier to paint the areas that I want to kind of obliterate first, maybe, and then leave little gaps. Well, I'm going to take now some just pure yellow right out of the tube. I'm going to paint a little bit with this. I'm even considering putting a little bit of blue into this, but let's just see. Okay, yeah, that definitely works. That's what we needed, a bit more pure solid yellow, a little bit more intensity. Again, I'm not putting it everywhere, which is kind of tricky. It's, in many ways, it's harder to do this than it is just to quickly cover the whole surface. Kind of have to be a little bit more careful about where the paint goes. Just tapping these areas a little bit. Now he's also got areas where there's some white. Let's take a little bit of this. So I'm kind of putting it there and then just kind of slightly blending it in, but not too much. I'm just going to wipe off that excess white, and I'm going to go back to my yellow just to kind of incorporate Okay, now I'm going to take just a tiny fraction of blue, a little bit of that. You see, it goes a long way. I'm just going to get a bit of this on my brush and do the same thing. So we've got a little bit of that teal literally coming through the painting. And then we've got a bit of that teal that is on the surface of the painting. My yellow again. I just think it's fascinating. What I see here is this is a well, not a lifetime, maybe 30 years of painting abstract expressionist paintings of Beauford Delaney painting abstract expressionist paintings and using that to create a really complex background. And then saying, you know what, I could just make this painting like this, but I'm going to throw a face right in the middle of this abstract expressionist painting. Take that. What do you think about that now? Rub that paint off. Okay. Oh, let's do the same thing down here. So now this is where I want to try to create a little bit of that collar and leaving a little bit of the green that was there before untouched. And if we're not happy with the results, we can always just add more, paint those lines back, but I'm not sure how well that comes across on camera. And then let's do the same thing on the jacket here. Let's take our white, or sorry, cool yellow. Getting there. I think I'm just going to take that same dark color, back in that collar there. So this is the same color that was just underneath here previously that I just painted over. Right, this area here. I think I painted a little bit of it too much, and I kind of needed that edge around the neck. Okay, how am I doing for time? Okay, not bad, not bad. I thought I was like, oh, maybe I'll be much later than I thought, but I think I spoke for about an hour. So That's pretty good for right now. Let's go to the next step then. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about the painting thus far. I think we've got pretty much the colors at this stage in the right place. There's still more to do, but I think we're probably a lot further than you might expect. Now, I know I should probably knock on wood, because as always, things never seem to go according to plan, which is a good thing for everybody else out there to remember. That I'm sure you've heard me say, oh yeah, it should be done in 15 minutes, and then 2 hours later I'm still painting away. That all artists experience those kinds of surprises. And I would go so far as to say that's one of the reasons why I paint. Not why I give up painting, but being surprised is really one of the main reasons why I enjoy painting. Because it's always a little bit of out of control, and there's always a little bit of surprise that happens, and a little bit of like, what's going on? I gotta make this do something, or it's doing what it wants to do, and I'm just gonna hold on for the ride, right? I know that for many people, that exact aspect of painting where it's not behaving the way you want it to do is like literally the most frustrating thing on earth. I get it. But I think as the years have gone by, that's one of the things that I like the most, is just sort of the mystery, the strangeness, the unexpected. Those are things that I find just fascinating about painting. Okay. Well, let's, what do we want to do next here? I think I want to go into the eyes, because we've got these kind of weird alien eyes here. So let's maybe zoom in and tackle that next. So, you know, I'm going to take the same kind of color that I mixed here previously. I'm going to add a little bit of white into it, just to make it's kind of a little bit of a dirty, basically kind of a grayish color, but it's a little bit more on the brownish green kind of thing. I think we always want to just be careful about adding too much white into eyes. This can kind of make them look a little bit strange. I mean, even that looks more white than maybe I even wanted, so I'm going to kind of darken that even a bit. Now I am going to go for a little bit more white. Ah! It's okay, we'll let that dry. In fact, that's perfect. That's actually the color I wanted the whole time. Right, there's your Bob Ross happy accident. right there. Okay. Now, let's take our black. I'm going to mix a bit of a brown. Oops. So mixing a brown here. I'm putting some black into it. So I'm going to paint with some darker black. With black, but I don't want to just paint with pure black. I want there to be a little bit more brown. I want to reserve my black for the very end if necessary. As I've said times before, I always think of like black as kind of like a fire extinguisher. If you need it, use only in a case of emergency, right? It's hard doing this because I don't have any place I can rest my fingers on the painting itself, because everything's still wet. So I'm not too worried about these lines being a little bit too thick, or I'm still gonna go back and paint over top of most of these, in between these lines even, right? So I'm also gonna go kind of dive back into this brown that has less or even very little black at all. Right? I mean, this looks right at, like out of a Van Gogh here, right? Well, at least from my paintings thus far. I don't say that to flatter myself, but just that this kind of, these brush strokes, as mine appears, it reminds me of a lot of Van Gogh's work. It's not going to stay like this forever, but this line in between the lips is a bit darker. Okay. Let's get that neck first. I mean, one thing I'm trying to do is not do perfect lines here. And kind of let them be a little bit loose and wobbly. Which might sound funny, because you're like, why would you want a kind of a shaky hand to do that? So one of the kind of most famous ways that Henri Matisse, the great French painter, did was literally holding the brush further away. Right? So rather than painting like as if you're writing a check to your landlord or to buy bars of gold, right? We're painting with like the paintbrush held much further away, and then that creates a little bit of imprecision. And again, why would anybody want to paint in a way where we're deliberately painting, inviting sloppiness and messiness to happen? Well, because it's kind of exciting. It's like the same reason people go on a roller coaster ride, is because you're losing control, and maybe you don't get the line you want, but sometimes you get a line you didn't expect, and you're like, whoa, that's cool, right? So it's kind of like what I'm inviting the painting to do here. Is it's like, okay, I'm rolling the dice. What are we gonna get? What are we gonna get? Show me something. I'll deal. Oh, well, if it doesn't go the way I want, I'll try to fix it. Let's go. Again, just so you can see. I'm literally holding right at the very tip of this paintbrush. Okay. And let's now go up into the hair. I think what I want to do now, I'm going to take a little, just take some warm blue. And I'm just going to paint with some warm blue. I don't care if I get a little bit of other color on that paintbrush. So, I don't know what that looks like. It looks like, you know who this looks like right now? I don't know if, this reminds me a lot of Dennis Rodman. You know, the basketball player, played for the Chicago Bulls alongside Michael Jordan back in the 80s and 90s. Always had colored hair. I remember he had, at one point, those like spots in his hair like that. That's a lot. I just need to add a big nose ring here, and he looks just like Dennis Rodman. That's so funny. Okay, but I'm just putting that blue there, and let's go back to that hair. And maybe more so than ever now, I'm taking my black, and I'm gonna, you know, I'm now probably painting almost like little dabs of paint here. Being careful not to cover everything up. Oh, there's a bit more blue here. Again, holding the paintbrush further away. You know, if this idea of painting in this particular way is like very scary, then use the hair. Practice in the hair. That way you're not doing it around the eyes, and you know, there's very little at stake by painting it in the hair. Worst comes to worst, you could just paint this black back out. I really like this method of painting like African American Afro. Wow, that's, I mean, this is not like a big fro, but this, you know, I mean, it makes sense that an African American is probably has a pretty good way of painting his own hair, right? And the hair of his brothers and sisters. Let's see. I'm gonna keep on going here. I might, there's a little bit of that green in here. Let's just take a little bit of that green from way back. And you know, while I'm in here, gonna take a little bit of that. Now, if you don't see these colors there, that's okay. You don't have to paint them. Oops. I guess most of that wasn't on camera while I'm painting around there. That's okay. Okay. Oh, and you know what? Maybe while I'm just down here and I got this green on my brush, maybe let's take a look at this collar. Okay. I'm going to take more white. Actually, let's do it with her. Oh, I got a bit of cool yellow here. I'm just going for something super subtle. It's almost a bit too subtle. Now, ideally, this would have just been layers of paint that I just let kind of come through, but we're not all as amazing geniuses as Beauford Delaney here. So, if you're like me and you didn't quite get that under layer to come through as skillfully as the master, well, you can cheat a little bit with a line like that. Bring that back a bit. And I think I'm going to still paint another layer of cool yellow back over top of this whole area down here. But I think we're getting closer. Okay. I'm pretty happy with where I am in terms of time. Like, you know, I said I'd be done probably in about 3 hours, and that's 40 minutes from now. So, and I mean, let's just take a look. I like this painting as it looks right now. Like, that hair looks wild. Let's see these things side by side. We're getting there. I just need, so now these lines on the face are very dominant. And what I need to do is I need to darken the face in certain places and also lighten it in certain places as well. So let's go back to, I'm going to go back to this brown that I used earlier. This was my dark brown that I mixed for the face. And, yeah, it's perfect. And so this is just warm blue, warm yellow, and warm red, right? Let's zoom in, just... Okay, so like this is kind of like my favorite part of a painting. This is the kind of stuff where I can just paint all day long and forget about eating dinner and that kind of thing. I know this is not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but... So the other thing too I can do here is I can kind of start shaping some of these lines and make them thicker or thinner. Those darker lines. I should also say, like, when I'm doing this kind of thing, I'm trying to move around and around. I'm not trying to, like, focus on one place and get that perfect. I move around. Because I'm telling you, each time when I look at a certain area, even if I tried to finish it, often when I look away and I come back, I see more stuff. Just like I was saying earlier about this kind of blue and green in the background that I didn't notice until I started painting the painting. Same sort of thing, like, so because I know that I'm going to see more stuff again when I look at it again, I just allow myself to look again and again and again and not worry about getting it right the first time, right? I just kind of get a little bit of paint in my brush and kind of just, okay, I see a little, like, maybe, you know, again, I'll just show you, like, as I'm painting, you can see kind of how, you know, I'm looking at the painting, right? I'm kind of like, okay, I'm looking right up here. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let's go up here to that part of the forehead. Up here. You know, and again, I've already gone over this a few times. I'm loving this painting so far. It's I don't, sometimes it's like, okay, just be careful before you don't know what it's gonna look like before we're totally done. But I could be totally happy walking away right now. Absolutely. Even with the hair like it is right now, even the eyes not being quite finished, I'm pretty happy. But I do want to keep moving here. I want to get a little bit closer to the original. Like, even, again, the hair isn't totally done, but I just was like, okay, the hair is like 70% done. Let's go back to the face and get this face a little closer to being done, and then we'll come back to the hair. So, like, I'm going to go back to the eyes now with this darker, with basically my black. Because remember, I was using this kind of brown before. It was brown with black inside. So by painting black actually in these pupils. They are really going to be much stronger. I'm going to paint black between these lips. Right, there's only a few places where the black might be really showing through here. A little bit on the jawline. Okay, let's go back up into the hair again. So you see there's just lots more of that, the kind of creamy red color showing through. So it takes a lot of restraint to not just go fill that right in. Those colors do, I think they seem a lot more bold on camera. I think in person they're not nearly as bright. Like that I think, you know, it's always important to remember, at least even for just as I need to tell myself, that this, what you see on camera is but like 10% brighter than what I see in front of me. So sometimes I get into, like, if I try to match what they look like on camera, then it looks great on camera, and that's great for YouTube, but it's not really what I see in front of me. Okay, let's go back down to the jacket again. I'm gonna need some more cool yellow. Thought I lost my tube of paint for a second. Okay, so I'm just taking this cool yellow right out of the tube. The tendency is to want to just go right to white and add white into here. And while that will brighten, or lighten, sorry, it up considerably, it's also going to make it kind of pastel-like. And as much as I like pastels, it's not what we want here. You got to be careful when you add white to things because it has a pretty instant and intense effect. So in truth, we could do like 10 layers of this yellow. And each time it's just making a very incremental, subtle change. But it's getting there. I love how that looks. In fact, it's almost, I feel, maybe I went a little bit too far with that lighter color. So I'm just going to paint a bit over top of these lines, and it's just going to dilute that little, remember that green I painted maybe 20 minutes ago? There we go. Gets it pretty close to the original, gotta say. Pretty happy. I love how this looks. I mean, I'm a huge fan of this artist. I'm not saying I'm some kind of genius for painting a painting I really like. We're just reproducing this painting by one of the great artists I think of all time. Okay. Part of me wants to just stop because I love it so much here. But let's 6:33. Okay, let's give it another 10 minutes. And of course, as soon as I say that, I'm going to be here till the sunrise because I'll do something horrible to this painting. I'm going to go back into, in fact, let's go to a smaller brush. I go back into these kind of pink color. Remember, this is I made this color using like maybe 50% warm red, 35%. So what did I say? 60% warm red, 40% warm blue, somewhere around that, and then maybe. I know this doesn't add to 100, but let's say there's 5% warm yellow, 55% warm red, 40% warm blue. Does that something around there? Okay. And let's zoom back in here. Want to get a little bit of these pinks back in. forehead. Okay. And then let's go back in here with our just warm yellow out of the tube. Now it's probably gonna, as it dries, won't be quite so bold unless I paint kind of blobs of paint. So there's a few places I'm going to have to touch up with a little bit of black after this, but that's okay. Outlining here. just gonna go back into, let's go back to my darker brown. Didn't quite get that, did I? Okay, and then just a bit of my black. Back into my white or my yellow here with just a little bit of that. Basically my brush was a little bit darker. Let's take a look a little bit further back here. What do I want to do? Let's take this brown. So now I'm just kind of doing a little bit more global fixes here. I get these eyes. Darken under here a bit. This area, the shirt collar. open his eyes just a tiny bit more. So let's just show you what I'm going to do. Here's will be some, actually, before I even do that, let me... Okay, so we're just going to do some very minor finishing touches, and then we're going to be done. I promise myself. So we're just going to do a signature and just little things around his eyes. I think his eyes just, this, I guess, left eye on, but appears to be on the right side of the page. Just want to open it a little bit. It's a little bit closed, and it makes him, I want to get a little bit more of a joyous, kind of happy, kind of smile here, so... So when I say I'm opening up the eyes, really what I'm doing is I'm just thinning out that top eyelid so that it makes it look like it's a little bit higher. And that kind of gives it the appearance of the eyes just a little bit more open. I mean, a super subtle effect, but I think it just makes him look a little bit less sleepy. Also with that bottom lip here. Okay, so now let's just finish it off with the master signature. And well, maybe does that jacket need to be, could be a little bit more yellow. I guess I should probably do that first. And there's Lisa is in the chat there. Hi, Lisa. Okay, let's take our cool yellow. We can just do the same thing on the shirt as well. Right, I mean, how many layers of that cool yellow do we have there? Maybe like 4? If we put a little bit of white in there, we would have covered it really quickly. but then it would obliterate all that work we put in there trying to get that kind of nuanced color here. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly blow dry this. And then we'll assign it by the master. Okay, so he's using a bright, warm red. You know, actually I'm going to go to my smallest brush here. One thing I notice, like often when I'm teaching classes in person, I notice that often people are using what I would consider not the wrong brush, but just maybe the less appropriate brush, or brush that might be making it more difficult for someone to paint with. Either people are using a too big of a brush to try to do details, and then they get frustrated that the details look sloppy, or they use too small of a brush when they're painting in things like the background, and therefore it just takes a long time to paint that stuff in. So and I think it just comes with practice, is learning which brush is most appropriate for which part of the painting. So I'm just bringing this out just so I could, because the part of the bow in Beauford has disappeared. So I'm going to slide this under here so that I'll be able to see that as I paint it. All right. And honestly, if this was my own painting, I've done exactly the same things. You say, certainly you know your own signature, your own name, don't you, Michael? Well, I hope so. But it's also just for like size. Like I don't want to be surprised and run out of space, right? So I'll literally write my own name on a piece of paper, and sometimes I'll stick it on the painting and see, like, where does it need to go? Does it need to go right here? Does it need to go right here? Does it need to go here or up there, or moving it around? And because your signature is a part of the painting, right? We can disguise it. Some people won't even sign the front, and there's a whole argument about whether you should do that or not. Should you sign the front or the back? And there's times where I look at a painting and I say, it's done, and yet I think my signature would work well in an area that's often a little bit on its own. Versus there's times where I look at it and like, I think if I put my signature in there, no matter how subtle it is, it's going to be jarring. So I'm just going to err on the side of caution and just leave it to the side. Okay. So you know, it's interesting, just doing that, I can actually see that B again, where it kind of had disappeared. So maybe And also there's times where sometimes I might want to start on the right and work my way back. If this is sort of, I need it to fit in that area, and on the right side is kind of where I might run out of room. Either way. In the original, the signature is actually much smaller. I've enlarged it so it would look better on our paintings. Okay. I think it is time to say goodbye. Okay, so let's do a quick little comparison side by side and see how things went. Again, if you liked this episode, you found it entertaining, whether entertaining because you thought it was done well or because it was so bad that you just got to laugh, hey, stay tuned for more. Like this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when upcoming videos. Tomorrow, I might not be doing one at all. I might be doing one at 9 in the morning Pacific time. I don't know. I'll try to let you know as soon as possible, but my schedule's all over the place. Certainly, I really appreciate donations, but if you can't afford to make a donation, then just little things like just not skipping the ads around the videos, that is super helpful, right? But if you do want to leave a donation, here's a few links to do so. You can use PayPal, you can use the super chat function here within YouTube, and I did notice Otoro21 made a donation. It says, I recently painted Matisse's Marguerite, and I was very proud of how it turned out as my first serious painting, and it wouldn't have been possible without your class. Oh, thank you so much. And this is the first super chat from Otoro21. Wow, that's cool. I love that. That's the first time you did it, and you did it here on my channel in this episode. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Otoro. So you can do exactly like Otoro did, or you can also use the you can send e-transfer via PayPal or by using my email, which is on my website, or contact me through the Facebook group, and to send a check or e-transfer or whatever else. Thank you everyone who's donated over the years. So let's compare these paintings and just talk about what worked and what didn't, etc. So, what can we say? I mean, I think, you know, again, on camera, this definitely looks a lot brighter than it does in person. In fact, in person, I was starting to get a little worried that it was getting too dark. So it's not nearly as sort of, these lighter areas appear a little bit more integrated on my side than I think they appear on camera. But I kind of like how that looks, both on camera and in person. But because it has a kind of, again, that little bit of a Van Gogh quality. Those little bit more bold lines here are more in line with how Van Gogh painted than maybe I intended to do. But I like how it turned out. I'm actually, seeing it a little bit further away on camera. What's kind of nice is I see a little bit more of that, just a little bit of a smile in my painting that he has on the one on the left. For a while, he looked a little bit more kind of dour and a little bit bummed. Here, I feel like I've got a little bit of that. And often you might think, well, it's just the lips where the smile is. It's the smile, I'd say 50% of a smile is in the eyes. And that's one of the reasons why I opened that, or I call it opening the eyelid, but I just painted that bottom part of the top eyelid a little bit, just make a little bit more of the white of the eye, so they're a little bit less sleepy and a little bit kind of open and, you know, receptive, I guess. Okay, well, how about let's just zoom in and just take a quick little look at some details. You know, I guess first thing I notice really is my colors are a little bit more bold than his. He's integrated those colors a little bit more, which is again why I say mine's got a little bit more of a Van Gogh quality. He's painting with oil paints, and those paints remain open or wet much longer than acrylic paints, even with my slow dry medium in there. They still started to dry up after like 20 minutes. And
one of the things, you run the risk of, like, if you put too much slow dry medium, you make the paint super transparent. And I wanted to kind of keep the density of that paint. So it's always a little bit of a trade-off. What else can I say? I think my eyes got just a little bit smaller than his. I don't mind that, though. Let's, I'm happy enough with the face. Let's just kind of go down the rest of the painting and kind of look. This jacket, I think I probably could have done another, at least one more coat of cool yellow on top of there. I mean, it looks like warm yellow to this point because there's just so much of this darker gray brown underneath. And if I just did more and more and more layers, it would get brighter and brighter closer to the collar. But I don't mind it like that. I think most people won't know the difference unless they look at these two paintings side by side. I like how this turned out. I think, again, I could probably have gone more yellow and made this even more subtle. I don't mind it like that. And let's just look at the background. You know, as I look at that, you know, some of this I'm not super happy with. He's integrated that maybe a little bit better than I did. But I don't think I'm going to do anything to change it. I can live with it. So, and maybe just let's look at the hair up close. I think I could darken the hair a bit more and get rid of some of these little areas of the kind of red that are popping through there. But, you know, I kind of like how it looks. And I've said a number of times throughout this painting, I like how that looks. And it's not exactly like the original, but I like how it looks. And one thing I'm often doing is encouraging people to go with what they like rather than trying to match the painting perfectly. As I said, I probably could have stopped an hour ago, and I decided just keep on going and get a little closer to the original. But just for the sake of the program, but probably if I hadn't been on camera, I probably would have stopped a little bit earlier. I'm happy with where we got to. I'm not, but that's one of those things. Sometimes you got to know when to fold them, right? Or when to walk away, right? As Kenny Rogers once said. Okay, let's just one last look. This makes me really happy. There's certainly some episodes where at the end I'm like, oh my goodness, I just laid a big steamy one there. Whereas this one feels like, oh yeah, this one's probably going to end up in the living room. Because not only because I like how the painting turned out, but I also, the subject matter of James Baldwin, I think is, you know, somebody I admire. I think he's a great author. And the painter himself, Beauford Delaney, is, I think, also a great painter and someone that is, I think, just, I really admire that that tenacity in the face of like the light in the darkness is what he sort of represents to me. So, thank you everyone for painting along with me today. Tomorrow, perhaps, there'll be another Beauford Delaney painting. A painting of a so-called young musician, although it kind of looks to me like maybe Miles Davis, perhaps. You know, Miles Davis in his kind of wild phase of the 70s, well, it's from 1970, so maybe before Miles got too wild. Or, I mean, I love a lot of Miles. Anyway, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, no matter where you are on our beautiful planet. Good luck on your own creative journey. I can't wait to see your image on the Facebook group. And if you haven't joined the Facebook group, do it right now. We'll see you then, everybody. Good night. Bye-bye.